Well, good morning. Welcome to this special service of Lessons and Carols. The traditional Lessons and Carols service is 9 lessons and 9 carols. I think we've got 7 lessons and 7 carols, but in this Australian heat, I think that's probably about right for us. And the way the service works is we're going to sing through and read through the Christmas story. Reading will flow into carol and then back into reading and then back into carol, and without much interruption from me. So you can follow my lead. When I stand, you can stand. When I sit, you can sit. And the readers will just come up and read, and then when they're finished, we'll stand and sing our next carol. And so I trust that this service ministers to you as we focus on the Christmas story in this fresh way. And I do encourage you to take note of the lyrics in these beautiful Christmas carols. They're often very deep and meaningful, and sometimes they're so familiar they just brush over us, but let's focus on the meaning this morning. So we begin our time with our opening carol, O Come All Ye Faithful.
There will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past he humbled the land, but in the future he will honour Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of darkness a light has dawned. For unto us a child is born, To us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever.
But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from ancient times. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth, and he will be our peace.
Something I should have mentioned at the start before we got going is if it's a very hot day, and please don't feel obliged to stand for every carol. You're more than welcome to sit if it gets too much to stand. Sorry, let's continue.
Above In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favoured. The Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favour with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end." "How will this be?" Mary asked the angel, "since I am a virgin?" The angel answered, "The Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she, who was said to be unable to conceive, is in her 6th month, for no word from God will ever fail." "I am the Lord's servant," Mary answered. "May your word to me be fulfilled." Then the angel left her.
those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them.
And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Saviour has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favour rests." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them.
We're going to continue on with our next carol, Jenny, because there's no young ones here for the kids spot, so we won't get Emily to do a kids spot to the adults. So let's continue to sing while shepherds watch their flocks by night.
After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi came from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born to the King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star had seen when it rose, went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to the country by another route.
Song. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing that was made has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so through him all might believe. He himself was not the light, he came only to bear witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. So he came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet, to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, nor a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
Please be seated. Well, isn't it wonderful to have the choir both up in the loft and also on the side here? We're getting it in full surround sound. It's been wonderful. So we've still got one carol to sing, but I think we should show our appreciation now, don't you? Well, as you look back on 2024 this morning, I wonder what stands out for you. What would categorise this year for you? Perhaps it was something on the world stage, the Paris Olympics, the conflict in Ukraine or Israel, Maybe it was Donald Trump getting convicted of 34 felony counts, then getting shot, then getting re-elected. That was a pretty big year for him. Maybe it was the Oppenheimer versus the Barbie movie showdown at the cinemas, or the rise of artificial intelligence. Maybe it was the enormous explosion that Taylor Swift was back in February when she visited Australia. Often more powerful, though, than the big news items is what's been happening for us on a personal level. For me, 2024 stands out as a year to cherish. The last year where we have all 4 kids living at home. And so we've been trying to make the most of this precious time and get together as often as possible. What about you? What stands out in 2024? Our experience of life is constantly changing, and of course that impacts on our relationships, including the most important relationship that we're in, that is our relationship with our Maker. As much as we like to think of ourselves as objective thinkers, the reality is that our experience of life does shape our view of God. Some of us sitting here this morning have had a fabulous year, a glorious year of happiness and joy. Our hearts are full with thankfulness, and given that, it's easy to believe that God is a God of love and a God of peace. But then there are others here this morning who look back on a horrible 2024, and being thankful is the last thing that comes to mind. The idea that God is a God of love and peace actually seems harder to believe this year than it did previously. And for many, this subjective experience of God leaves us with a deeply troubling concern. We're concerned that perhaps God is just a projection of our own experience of life, a projection of our longings and our fears. So how do we know? How do we know if God is real or just a projection? And if he is real, how do we know what he's truly like? Well, lots of people have opinions about God, and lots of religions have preachers and prophets and gurus and spiritual guides and holy books. But the central claim of Christianity, in fact the central claim of Christmas, is that God has actually shown up in person. And this showing up is the primary means by which God has revealed himself to humanity. It's not that God hasn't communicated through prophets and holy books and through the very creation itself. It's just that these are all a distant second to what happened on that first Christmas in that little town of Bethlehem. As the carol says, the hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. Listen to the way that John puts it in the opening lines of his gospel. In the beginning was the Word. This is a reference to Jesus before the incarnation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then down in verse 14 he says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. The one who was with God, the one who was God, became flesh. Now, ancient cultures knew all about apparitions of the gods. Whether you were in Greece or Rome or Egypt or India, it was commonplace for one of the gods to appear in an apparition and reveal an aspect of deity. But John is saying something different here. He's not talking about an apparition. He's talking about God the Creator taking on flesh. That word flesh is a very confronting word. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us, says John. Flesh is a confronting word, and the idea of God becoming flesh, I think it's a confronting idea if you stop and think about it. The sages of the ancient Greco-Roman world thought it was a ridiculous notion. How could the infinite God be contained in a finite body? How could the eternal God enter into time? How could the Supreme Being experience the uncertainties and the frailty and the dangers and the desires of our human flesh. But that's the Christian claim. That's the Christmas claim. The infinite God, the eternal God, the supreme being, the creator of all, enfleshed. Or to put it in Latin, he incarnated. The Gospel of Matthew uses different language, but it's getting the same idea across. Matthew identifies Jesus as Emmanuel, God with us. And we'll be looking at that passage next Sunday. But both Gospels are making the same point. Jesus is not just a prophet. He's not just a rabbi, a teacher. He's not just a vision of God or an apparition of God. He is God with us, God enfleshed. And the carol we've just sung brings those two ideas together in the second verse. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see. Hail the incarnate deity. Pleased as man with man to dwell, Jesus, our Emmanuel. It's a beautiful verse, but the language is tricky, so let me just take a moment to unpack a couple of things. The word Godhead might throw you. It's a theological term that simply means God's essential nature. It's a shorthand way of capturing the idea that God is Trinity, one God in three persons. And veiled means hidden or concealed. So that first line is saying, when you look at the man Jesus, you're not just seeing a man, you're actually seeing the very essence of God hidden in human flesh, contained in human flesh. So the first line is an invitation to look to Jesus and to see God. The second line is an invitation to worship him. Hail the incarnate deity, the divine one. Worship the enfleshed God. That's what incarnate means, enfleshed. Worship the enfleshed God. Pleased as man with man to dwell. Well, God was pleased to become a human and to dwell with humans. Jesus, our Emmanuel. Jesus is God with us. So running throughout this verse of the carol is the theme that Jesus is the one who shows us what God is like. And this is such an important truth because it means we're not left speculating in the dark about God. He has actually taken the initiative in revealing himself by becoming one of us. Let me illustrate for you. I want you to try to picture in your mind the car that I owned when I was 18. In fact, I only owned half of it. My mate owned the other half. We pitched in $450 each and got one between us. You got a car in your mind? You're picturing what sort of car would Dave own when he was 18? Well, I know there's a few people in the room that can probably picture it because they've seen photos of it. But the rest will need to speculate. What sort of car would Dave buy? What sort of car would you get for $900? Some guesses might be closer than others, but in the end, they will just be guesses unless you see this photo. Here it is. Taken in Tijuana, Mexico. It's a 1981 Pontiac Firebird. It looked the part, but we did spend a fair amount of time doing this, letting the engine cool down. Now, what is this photo? The photo is a revelation to end the speculation. It's a revelation to end the speculation. This makes what you were guessing about clear. And I'm sure you can see the connection. The claim of Christmas is that Jesus is the self-revelation of God. He is the revelation to end the speculation. Even better than a photo, Jesus is God in person, in the flesh, God with us. Our second carol tonight spoke of the sages, kind of gave some instructions to the magi, the sages. It told them to leave their contemplations about God. They don't need to speculate anymore. They simply need to follow the star to Bethlehem. And the same is true for us as well. Christmas invites us to stop speculating about what God is like, to look to Jesus, to look to the way Jesus spoke to others, to look to the things he taught, to look to the way he treated his enemies, and most of all, to look to the way he laid down his life for us to save us. And as we do that, as we look to all those different aspects of who Jesus is and Jesus' character, we see the very character of God, the very heart of God, the very essence of God revealed to us. So this Christmas, don't look to your subjective experience of life, regardless of how 2024 has been for you. Don't project that onto God. Trying to relate to God that way will turn your Christian life into a roller coaster. I mean, who knows what 2025 will bring? Look instead to that one moment in history when God showed up in the strongest way possible. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Our last carol this morning invites us to cast our minds back to that scene in Bethlehem and to behold, to look, to see that child in the manger. And it suggests that we might adopt a certain attitude as we survey that scene, that we should be joyful and triumphant. Why joyful and triumphant? Well, the reason for rejoicing is because we see that in that manger, not only a human baby, but as the carol says, we also see true God of true God. And that true God of true God grew up to take away the sin of the world and triumph over sin and death. So let's, as we sing this final carol, be joyful and triumphant. Well, you can remain standing. I trust you've had an uplifting morning. If you're keen, we're going to do it again this evening at the Carols by Candlelight, 6:30 for a free barbecue down on the grass, and then the Carols service itself will start at 7. Bring a picnic rug or a chair to sit on. And then on Christmas morning, we'll be here in the church at 9 a.m. for a service of Holy Communion. Just to mention, if you were hoping to leave a donation to the work here at Cobbitty, there's an offertory box at the crossroads of the church. We don't pass the plate around anymore because most of the regulars just give online. And if you're a visitor or a guest with us this morning, then you're welcome to contribute to that work, but the principle we work on here is that the members of the church should support the work of the church. And so please just be our guest this morning. What we'd much prefer to do is have a cup of tea with you. If you'd like to come out of the door and turn right and head around to the Heber Chapel for a cuppa and a slice of Christmas cake. And while you're there, you might like to congratulate Peter and Pam for getting to 60 years of marriage this week. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.